there was a Teamsters union official once up on this hill behind us who was asked at the opening of a hearing into his affairs, he said, well, wouldn't you agree that the Teamsters union is a very powerful union in American trucking? And he said, looking rather narrowly back at the senator, he said, well, Senator, being powerful is a bit like being ladylike. He said, if you have to say you are, you probably ain't. So I think I like America most of all on the days when people are not going around shouting, USA, USA, we're number one, we're the greatest. I prefer the days when they don't do that, when they're probably most to be admired. It's a case of always think of it, never speak of it. Of course, objectively as well as subjectively, the American Revolution is now the only revolution with a fighting chance of survival and success. The idea that you could create a multicultural democracy over a vast expanse of the Earth's surface that could possibly be emulated by other people. Why not think of America as a lucky country, for example? It has oceans on either side of it. It has reasonably tranquil neighbors on the land. It managed to buy Louisiana for a knockdown price, and Louisiana meant, the purchase meant this whole central sway of the United States. It managed to buy Alaska at a fire sale price from the Tsar. It doesn't get any better than this. And that's why I quite like the New York version of the national boast, which is this a great country or what? Now, I think that there needs to, anyone who just goes around saying unironically, well, if you know a better country, why don't you go there, the sort of love it or leave it thing, is, I'm afraid to say, illustrating a quite different point and reminding people of other traits in the American character and traits in American history that are not so attractive or so wonderful.
However, I'd also point out that you're right, it's lucky, but goodness, think of those people that got here.
Oh yes, look,
I mean, the actual tenacity.
And it's made of oil and coal and everything that you can possibly imagine, uranium.
But still, the ability of these immigrants to come here and construct, in a matter of 100, 200 years, the most powerful and indeed diverse and stable democracy on Earth.
Slightly rough on the people who are living here already. One should not forget.
To be sure.
There's a story, by the way, and
nobody's proud of that.
No one should be proud of that.
This morning about Baltimore. You're next.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have a quick one-line quote, and then I have a question for Christopher. Benjamin Disraeli once said, "The world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes." I know we've had shadow governments in local and state, and I'd like to ask Christopher who he thinks really runs the show.
One of the great things about living in America is that there's the fantastic number of beliefs that there are about who's really running it. Which is, the Constitution says, should be, as it were, you and me. There are people who believe it's the Illuminati, there are people who believe it's the Jews, there are people who believe it's the Freemasons, there are people who believe it's just corporate America or the military-industrial complex. I think that there is a danger at the moment that there's too much of a lottery about who controls things, and that the price of entry into that lottery is very expensive. That's what I meant earlier by the relationship between corporate culture and organized crime with the Enron business. I hope and believe that many Americans, despite their current sort of patriotic unity, are really annoyed, if not incensed, at the ease with which rich crooks can get access to the highest circles of the government.
Mr. Sullivan,
and the way in which the government considers that that's nobody's business but theirs. Now, I think there should be a real outrage about that.
Let's go to Long Island, New York, on the Republican line. You're on the air.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for your program. It's the first time I'm calling. My question is addressed to Mr. Hitchens, please. It's a two-part question. Number one, in order for America to be the greatest nation on earth, can you explain at what price? Isn't it at price of exploiting other countries, their natural resources, and bringing all the brains and all the talented people here? And number two, Mr. Hitchens, please explain for me, because I respect your work and your opinion. How do you define terrorism? Is it a different definition for it? Isn't it what Israel is doing, assassinating people and killing children and innocent civilians in hundreds and over the years in millions? Isn't that terrorism?
Thanks, caller.
Well, on the first point about exploitation, as you call it. I mean, as I mentioned before about the Congo, and I could have mentioned for the other countries too, there are places where the United States has entered into alliances with predatory elites for its own benefit or for the benefit of small groups of Americans. It's a disgraceful business. There are many people also who believe, and not all of them are radicals like myself, that the United States is better off tending to its own business, and that ever since perhaps as far back as 1898, expansionism has had its major downsides. That's a huge debate. I don't think the United States needs, or as a society requires of itself, that it exploit others. No. I mean, it could on its own resources get by, so it's not, there's no imperial imperative. I always avoid the use of the word terrorism where I can, because it has become far too generalized and loaded and ideologized in so many ways that it can be used by anyone who isn't a pacifist to say that it's the pursuit of politics by forcible means. I think if you wanted a definition, it would be the exclusive concentration on the disruption of civilian life and the taking of civilian life as an end as well as a tactic, as something good in itself as well as a means to another end. And that's the purely double distilled essence of it that one saw on September the 11th, but I still prefer to call that religious fascism, because that's what it really is.
Let me say, this notion of exploitation...
And as for the Israelis, everybody knows that, because I mustn't seem to duck that question, because I know how toxic it is, everybody knows that if you want to occupy people against their will, if you want to be the governor of another people who haven't chosen you, you will end up visiting terrible cruelty on them. There certainly cannot be a humane occupation.